Hey, welcome back to my channel. I hope you enjoyed part 1, which was my favorite East Coast destinations. This video is part 2, and it'll be my favorite West Coast USA destinations. So let's go. Okay, so in the first video, I mentioned that I grew up in Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas, that I've also lived in Austin and Denver, Colorado. So those places are not on my list. I've explored them quite a bit, but I haven't visited them on vacation. I lived there, so they did not make the list. But many of my West Coast destinations, which we're gonna talk about in this video, all kind of stem from me being able to travel from Denver to West Coast locations much easier and faster than I could have when I was living in Texas. So that's what kind of informs that. So I just want to get that out of the way so you know where I'm coming from, but let's go ahead and jump into my first West Coast destination, which was actually a road trip that I took with my mom from Denver up through Wyoming and Yellowstone over to Utah for my cousin's wedding, and then back to Denver, Colorado. It was a lot of driving. I think we did it in like a week because that was all we had, and it was kind of around the wedding. So it was a lot. I definitely think you could give yourself a lot more time. And if you give yourself a lot more time, you could fit in Mount Rushmore and really do a really cool loop. We just did up through Wyoming, then down through Idaho, and then Utah, and then back through Colorado. And it's just, Wyoming is very different from Utah and Western Colorado, which is very mountainous. You get a lot of different terrain. Yellowstone is a really cool national park, which I'm gonna do a different video on national parks later this month, so I won't go into it too much. But we had a really amazing time there, just with like all the natural features and the animals that you see out in the open. And the terrain is really cool throughout the whole park. And then driving down through Idaho, which I had never been to Idaho before, and Utah is just really pretty with the mountains and everything that you see along the way. And then the drive back to Colorado was actually really cool. I passed some like a dinosaur city and some other really cool natural features that I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise because they're not really near the big cities. So if you do have the opportunity to do a road trip in anywhere in the US, really, that's kind of what you find, I feel like, is just really cool areas that you wouldn't naturally see. That was really cool. But that's another one, if you just want to see like sort of the Rocky Mountains and the majesty of the US, that is definitely a good little route to take, and you get to see some cool things along the way. Now, another one I just did a quick weekend trip to San Diego, California. So I was living in Denver at the time when I did this trip. I'd heard of it, obviously. I knew it was kind of like a beach town and had a little bit more of like a chill vibe. It has a lot of influence from Mexico and Mexican culture. So that'd be a really interesting place to visit, and I absolutely loved it. I've visited a lot of different places up and down the coast of California at this point, and I think San Diego might actually be my favorite one. The food was amazing, and I actually did a food walking tour, which also turned out to sort of be like a historical tour, so it kind of got the best of both worlds. Our tour guide knew a lot about the city, so as we were walking along, he would explain stuff, and then we paid to have like little appetizers from each of these like 5 different restaurants along the way. So it was a really cool way. I also was traveling by myself, and so it was another way to like meet other people who were also traveling. Also, while in San Diego, I did have a rental car, but I took it up a little bit to Torrey Pines, which is typically known for its golf course. There's a major golf tournaments that happen there, but you can take it up, and there's areas that you can go hiking along the coast, and it was just beautiful. I mean, there were a lot of people out there. It was a really nice day when I was there, but it was like blue ocean and like green grass and just this really wonderful trail. So there are things even like outside the city center, but that are not very far. And near the Torrey Pines area, there was another like cute little like shopping center, and I think I stopped and got like ice cream or something. And so there's even a little bit to do like in and within around San Diego. It's definitely worth visiting if you're in California and you maybe don't want to do the typical like LA or San Fran thing. And so the last place on sort of our West Coast list is Portland, Oregon. The motivation for going there was, one, I wanted to visit it, but I had been trying to get Ed Sheeran tickets for Denver when he was playing at Red Rocks, and they kept selling out like super fast, like 15 minutes. And so I was not able to do that. So I just looked at his tour schedule. It was like, where is he gonna be in the next couple of months? Where would I wanna go? Like, what's a weekend? And it just so happened that he was playing on a Saturday in Portland. And I was like, yes, perfect, going. So this was another solo trip. As you can tell, I take a lot of solo trips up to Portland, and I had an amazing time. So one of the ways that I prefer to travel, and that I find that really works for me, is to have like at least one thing scheduled or planned, especially if it's just a weekend trip, that I'm kind of working my schedule around. Because what you don't want to do is like bounce from place to place in a city, and then you spend all your time commuting and not actually seeing anything. So it helped having like that concert. I was like, okay, I have a concert tickets, I'm doing that Saturday night. Same thing in San Diego. I had that food walking tour booked pretty early on. It was like in the middle of the day on a Saturday, so I kind of knew I needed to plan my day around that. So that's just a travel tip. That's just a way that I do it. And I find that it kind of helps me build out my schedule. Otherwise you get overwhelmed with all the options. But I did go to Portland, but I drove it just a little bit outside the city, is Multnomah Falls. And so I went on a hike. You'll start to see a theme with the things I like to do. Is like hiking, a city thing, and visiting like a local brewery or a restaurant. Like those are kind of my activities when I travel. But yes, Multnomah Falls was absolutely gorgeous. I got some amazing photos, and every time I see it online now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been there. And then I also did drive down, just randomly on a whim, down to Salem, Oregon, which is actually the capital of Oregon, because I have this thing where I want to visit as like many state capitals as I can. So I'm doing pretty good. So anytime I'm close to one in a state, I definitely try to do that. So I went and visited Salem for like a half day. And then, I mean, Ed Sheeran in concert, I mean, you can't beat it. So that was pretty wonderful. And I also did a city bike tour, which was really good. I like to do at least one tour. I usually try to do it at the beginning if I can, because it really helps you lay out the city and it informs you what you might want to go back to. So you can do a lot of research online, and you know, I try to do a little bit, but anytime you can like have a person showing you around, especially if they can do it in like a 2-hour period, and kind of be like, hey, this is this, then you get to visually see what you might want to go back to. And then again, you know where in the city it's laid out, and so you can build your schedule around the one thing that you've already kind of booked or planned, which might just be your tour, and that's totally fine. So that is Portland. It was a really cool city. And yeah, it's definitely one that I would want to go back to sometime. That's it. Those are my favorite West Coast destinations thus far. If I missed any or you have any recommendations, put them in the comments below. For more travel inspiration, follow me on Instagram at Traveling Taylor. And be sure to subscribe for next week's video where I share my bucket list destinations. So I will see you next week.